Y'all didn't think you were getting out of October without a Crockpot video from me, right? I mean, the lady who has 6 slow cookers is definitely gonna observe Crocktober. Pretty much every month is Crocktober in my house. You got something to say about it? In this video, I'm gonna share with you a capsule of Crockpot recipes. If you've heard of a capsule wardrobe where you have just a handful of pieces that you mix and match to make multiple outfits, it's kind of the same concept, but with cooking. So I'm gonna share with you a list of 20 ingredients, and then I'm gonna give you 20 ideas for recipes you can make in your Crockpot using ingredients from that list and just kind of basic, you know, standard kitchen spices and seasonings and stuff. So here are the 20 ingredients that I chose for this recipe capsule. Starting with the produce, we've got carrots, celery, onions, garlic, some vegetables that add a lot of flavor to dishes and where a lot of recipes begin. And then I've got some more hearty selections. We've got some bell peppers, some potatoes, some corn. And if I'm working with Crockpot recipes, I usually use frozen corn, but canned or fresh cut off the cob would probably work too. I also wanted to use some spinach in a few of the recipes, but kale would probably work as well. The meat I'm going to be using in this recipe capsule is chicken. Thighs or breasts would probably work interchangeably in most of the recipes. And then I also decided to throw in some smoked sausage, some variety of bean. It could be black beans or pinto beans or kidney beans. And in some recipes, dry beans might work okay if you were to cook them ahead of time. I've also got some canned tomatoes and some salsa. And then to round out the starches, in addition to potatoes, I'm gonna be using, you know, some kind of pasta in some of the dishes. Again, the kind is probably interchangeable in most of the dishes. If you don't have the kind I'm using, you could usually substitute another. And also some kind of rice. And typically I'm going to be using some kind of white rice, like a basmati or a jasmine rice. If you decide to use brown rice or a wild rice, you might need to add more liquid to the recipes and adjust the cook time. I've got some heavy cream in this capsule because sometimes adding just a splash of that, a little bit of that to some of the recipes just adds a richness and a flavor. And also some kind of cheese is helpful. Typically I have cheddar and Parmesan on hand at almost any time. But if you want to check out some of these recipes and decide what you like, maybe you'd like a mozzarella or a pepper jack or a Colby jack or something instead. And I went ahead and included taco seasoning and ranch seasoning to round out this list of 20 ingredients. That might be something that you don't consider, you know, an ingredient. Maybe it's more of a seasoning. Maybe you make your taco seasoning from scratch. But those are really good all-purpose seasonings that you can use in a lot of recipes. So if you keep those on hand, typically you're going to be in good shape with a little salt, pepper, and oil. And I also included some kind of broth. I usually use some kind of bouillon, like chicken bouillon or beef bouillon, and water. Maybe you consider that more of a pantry staple than an ingredient, but I use it a lot in my Crockpot recipes. It is a blustery, rainy fall day, so it's the perfect kind of day to make some comfort food, and I'm gonna get some Crockpot cheesy chicken and rice going. I am using 2 large chicken breasts. This is about a pound of chicken breast. You could use chicken thighs. I chopped up 2 medium carrots, 1 stalk of celery, and about half of an onion. We're gonna put that in now. And also some minced garlic. I would probably use a couple tablespoons. I'm just gonna use up the rest of what's in this little jar. To season this, I'm gonna use 1 teaspoon of paprika, 2 teaspoons of Italian seasoning, and then salt and pepper to taste. But I also think that just a packet of ranch seasoning would suffice if you just want to use this instead. Now I want to add 4 cups of chicken broth. So I'm just going to use 4 teaspoons of broth base and then 4 cups of water. I'm gonna cook mine on high for 3 to 4 hours until the chicken is done and ready to shred up. You could do low for about 5 to 6 probably. I almost forgot, this is totally optional, but I am gonna add a couple tablespoons of butter in there. I want that in there while the chicken is cooking since I'm using leaner meat. When my chicken was done, I took it out of the crock pot and I shredded that up. It's sitting right here. And now I'm gonna stir in 2 cups of rice into my broth mixture that's left here. Just a reminder that if you use brown rice, you have to use more liquid. White rice is about 2 to 1. Brown rice is a lot more than that. I wanna make sure that that is completely submerged in the liquid. Then I'm gonna put my chicken back in on top. I'm gonna pop the lid on this. I'm gonna cook it on high. I'm gonna set the crock pot on high. Even if I cooked it on low earlier, I would set the crock pot on high when I put the rice in. I'm gonna check on it after about 20 minutes and see how the rice is soaking up the liquid. Okay, the rice has soaked up most of the liquid in here really, really nicely. A couple more things just to make this creamy and cheesy. I'm gonna add about half a cup of cream and 2 cups of shredded cheese. I'm using just the triple cheddar mix, the already shredded up kind. I think other kinds of cheese would be fine in this. I'm gonna set my slow cooker just on the warm setting, and I'm gonna pop the lid back on for just about 5 minutes or so to make sure that all of that cheese gets melty, and then it will be ready to plate up. You might disagree, but in my opinion, a creamy, cheesy chicken and rice is second only to like a homemade chicken noodle soup when it comes to comfort food. I don't know why, this is just like a bowl of comfort right here. I have just some broccoli on the side and I've already tasted this. It turned out fantastic. It's gonna be so yummy. It is a cool, rainy, chilly day today in Tulsa, America. So I am getting some Cajun chicken chowder going in the slow cooker. Right now, I am making up the seasoning mixes. I thought about just using a standard Cajun seasoning. You absolutely could. I'd probably use about a tablespoon of that, but I decided I would make mine from scratch today. So I'm using a teaspoon each of garlic powder, onion powder, paprika, oregano, and salt, and then half a teaspoon of thyme and just a pinch, like a quarter teaspoon or less of cayenne and cracked black pepper. And I'm making up 2 separate ramekins of that seasoning because I'm gonna make one in the crock pot today, 1 batch in the crock pot, and I'm gonna put a batch in the freezer for later. I have my crock pot here and my freezer bag here, so we are going to prep what's going in the crock pot and in the freezer bag here together. First off, I have about 1 pound of chicken breast in each container. This is 1 package of smoked sausage. I went for the Cajun style, but really any kind of smoked sausage will do. So I'm gonna divide that between the crock pot and the freezer bag. This is 1 onion chopped up. I used my rotary grater here. So I'm gonna divide that between the 2 containers. So half an onion chop going in each recipe. I'm gonna use about 1 tablespoon of minced garlic. My seasoning mixes, 1 for the crock pot, 1 for the freezer bag. And I'm also gonna toss in just a teaspoon of chicken bouillon. This would be 1 cube of chicken bouillon. There's so much else that's flavoring this, especially with the sausage in it. I don't wanna use too much chicken broth because I'm afraid it would be too salty. I'm gonna toss in about 1 cup of frozen corn. This bag is 2 cups, so I'll just divide it in half between the crock pot and the freezer bag. 1 can of fire roasted tomatoes going in each thing here. And now the freezer bag is actually ready to pop into the freezer. So let me put my crock pot over in the heater, in the heating element, and I'll show you what else we're putting in this for today. To get this started today, and what I would need to add on cooking day is just 4 cups of water. Then I'll put the lid on this, high for 3 to 4 hours, low for probably 5 to 6 until the chicken is done and ready to take out and shred up. Once this is done cooking and the chicken is all shredded up and put back in the slow cooker, I'm going to add 1 cup of heavy whipping cream, about 3/4 of a cup of Parmesan cheese, and 1 cup of ditalini pasta. And then I will cook it on high until the pasta is done cooking and everything is heated through again. Okay, this turned out so fantastic. I've already tasted it. I went pretty light on the spiciness. My kids like spicy things, okay, but not like overly spicy things, so I wanted to err on the side of caution there. My husband said that he would like it to be just a tad spicier, but he really liked it too. He said the flavor was really fantastic. I just have some bread to go along with it here so we can dip it in the broth, like soak up all that extra broth. Yum. When I batch cook chicken for meal prepping for a coming week, one of my favorite ways to do that is to just throw some chicken breast in the crock pot with a little salsa and taco seasoning, and then once it's done cooking, shred it up. I think I could also slice up the chicken really thin before I put it into the crock pot with the salsa and the taco seasoning, and then also slice up some bell peppers and onions and toss those in as well and let it cook. And I should have like chicken fajitas. You know, I could put those in a tortilla or just eat them on their own or over some rice. If you like chicken pot pie and you want something that, in my opinion, is just a little bit easier, you could try a chicken pot pie soup in the crock pot. And then you could make up some biscuits if you want, or you could serve it with like a crusty French bread or sourdough, like the one from our sponsor today, Wild Grain, which in my opinion is the perfect sponsor for a crock pot video. So many crock pot recipes go great with bread. Tasty, tender meats that you can put on buns or sandwich rolls. Cozy casseroles or delicious soups. And I mean, what goes better with a bowl of piping hot homemade soup than a piece of crusty homemade bread? And that's where Wild Grain has you covered, because they will deliver artisan breads, pastries, and pastas directly to your doorstep frozen. And then when you're ready to make them, they will go from the freezer directly to the oven and be ready in under 30 minutes. Now I know what you're probably thinking, Mindy, can't you make bread from scratch? Yes, I can make some breads when I have the time. But let me tell you something. I attempted for the better part of 6 months to get sourdough going. It's just kind of gummy and dense. And I'm not even gonna say to master sourdough, to amateur bake a sourdough loaf of bread. I have 2 college degrees. And I struggled mightily, trying really hard not to lose my temper. I finally gave up. And sourdough is actually one of Wild Grain's specialties. Unlike many store-bought options, Wild Grain uses simple ingredients you can pronounce and a slow fermentation process that can be easier on your belly and richer in nutrients and antioxidants. Wild Grain offers fully customizable boxes so I can choose exactly what I am getting in each of my deliveries. I can add things to my deliveries. I can delay them, reschedule them. I could also cancel my subscription at any time. If there is such a thing as cozy food season, it's right now. So there's never been a better time to try out Wild Grain. You can get $30 off your first box plus free croissants for the life of your subscription. When you follow the link in the description box below, you go to wildgrain.com/Mindy30 and you use my code Mindy30. And let me just tell you, I signed up myself during the same promotion and those croissants are next level. My younger daughter McKenna gets excited every time we get a box because she knows there's croissants in that box. Again, that code is Mindy30 for $30 off your first Wild Grain box plus free croissants for the life of your subscription, or just go to wildgrain.com/Mindy30. And thank you again to Wild Grain for sponsoring today's video and for being the unofficial sponsor of Cozy Season here in our household. So I have an open package of turkey smoked sausage that I like to use up in tonight's dinner. And in perusing the rest of my refrigerator, I also discovered that I have a red pepper and I have a yellow onion that is almost past its prime, so I definitely need to chop those up and use them. And I was starting to feel kind of a like jambalaya sausage and rice type dish. And I remembered that I had some celery in the freezer. I had some celery that was about to go bad, so I chopped it all up and froze it and stuck it in this Ziploc bag that I keep in the freezer. I have my veggies and my sausage chopped up here in my crock pot, and to that I added 2 bay leaves and about a teaspoon of Tony's seasoning, and also just a little bit of chicken broth base. And now I'm going to pour in about 3 cups of water, and I'm going to get this going on high. This is actually a little trick I use whenever I'm getting started on a slow cooker recipe a little later in the day than I would like, because even though it's a little harder than on the oven or the stove, it still isn't impossible to burn something in the slow cooker. So I prefer not to use the high setting if I can avoid it. I'm gonna let this cook on high for an hour, and when the timer goes off, I'm gonna bump it down to low for the last hour and a half to 2 hours that it's cooking before we add our rice. This has been cooking on low for about 2 hours now after cooking on high for 1 hour. And now I'm going to add 1.5 cups of rice. I'm using basmati rice. I'm going to stir that in and also add just a little bit of salt and pepper. And then I'm going to pop the lid back on and turn the temperature up to high again. And it should cook the rice in about 20 to 30 minutes. I'm just going to keep an eye on it and watch for it to be absorbing all that liquid. Here it is. The rice cooked up beautifully in just about 25 minutes. And then I just have a little side salad and some strawberries to go along with that. Really easy, delicious dinner on this summer weeknight. And I have shared before that the slow cooker can actually make baked potatoes and it can cook corn on the cob for you as well. But today I am going to make mashed potatoes in the crock pot. So I'm actually gonna cook the potatoes in the slow cooker and then we're gonna finish them up right in the crock pot as well. Let me show you how. I have about 3 pounds of russet potatoes that I peeled and then chopped into cubes. I've got my potatoes in here and now I'm gonna add 2 teaspoons of garlic powder and 1 teaspoon of salt, plus 1.5 cups of water. And then I'm gonna pop the lid on and set it to slow cook on high, and we'll come back to finish these mashed potatoes up later. My potatoes have been cooking on high for about 3.5 hours, probably about 3 hours and 45 minutes. And they're definitely done. And I am just going to use this little tool right here to kind of mash them up. I gave my potatoes a rough mash, and now I'm going to add about 1/2 cup of sour cream, a cup of grated cheese. This is just sort of the odds and ends from a few blocks that I had hanging out in the refrigerator. A little bit of milk, probably about 1/3 cup. Stir that around a little bit. Yummy, 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 yummy. A little salt and pepper to taste. A good cook has to taste everything, right? Yum. So I'm just going to pop the lid back on this. I'm just gonna put it on the warm setting. It does not need to cook anymore. So we'll keep those potatoes nice and toasty until we are ready to eat them. Tonight I am making a tortilla soup. I pulled this out of a little bitty wooden box that my husband has had since we met, so probably since he was in college, of various recipes that his family jotted down for him whenever he moved into his own apartment. This particular recipe doesn't have any dairy in the original recipe. It doesn't call for cream, it doesn't call for cream soups, it doesn't call for cream cheese, and it also doesn't have any beans in it. It actually uses corn and tomatoes and chicken in there, and it's a very brothy soup, so you can kind of do with it what you want. We usually sprinkle a little cheese on top of ours, and we're gonna make some little homemade tortilla strips from corn tortillas. I'll show you how I'm doing that. This is the recipe, and I'm pretty much sticking to it as is written, save for I'm going to use chicken thighs instead of chicken breasts because this is what I have. And also there's no other fat in this meal, so I think using a few chicken thighs, which are a little bit fattier than chicken breasts, I think that'll just lend a really nice flavor. But I've had it with chicken breasts before and it is very, very good that way as well. So I have about 1 pound of chicken thighs here. It calls for 2 cups of corn, which is what is in this bag here. Whenever it says 4 servings, half a serving each, that adds up to 2 cups. So I'm gonna use that. 1 onion, which I will chop, 1 small can of tomato sauce, and 1 regular 10-ounce can of what we call Rotel. That's the brand name, but it's diced tomatoes with green chilies. It calls for 4 cups or 2 15-ounce cans of chicken broth. I'm just going to make 4 cups of chicken broth using a broth base. To season this, it calls for 2 teaspoons of cumin, 1 teaspoon of chili powder, a bay leaf, and then 1/8 teaspoon each of crushed red pepper and cracked black pepper. I don't usually measure that when it's that small of an amount. I just put a pinch in. So all of that will go in my crock pot, and I'm gonna go ahead and put it on high because I want it to be done in about 3 to 4 hours. You could cook this on low for probably 6 or 7 hours. The original recipe calls for it to be cooked on low, but I'm gonna go ahead and bump it up to high because it's already the afternoon and we wanna have this for dinner. I forgot, you're also supposed to toss in 2 cloves of garlic chopped, or that is usually about 1 to 2 teaspoons of the already minced garlic. So that's what I'm gonna put in. When my mother-in-law makes this, she makes the little tortilla strips to put in this from corn tortillas, and she usually bakes hers in the oven. She'll put them on a cookie sheet and bake them at 375 for about 5 minutes and then kind of toss them around and bake them for 5 minutes more. That's what the directions on the recipe card say. But whenever I have done this before, I have used the air fryer. So I have cut about 8 corn tortillas into little strips. I'm going to toss them into the air fryer here, and then I'm going to cook these at 375. I'm going to start at about 6 minutes and then give them a little shake partway through. We'll check them and see how crispy they are. They may need 1 or 2 more minutes, but I usually do these in the air fryer and they turn out great. Soup is done. I took the chicken out and shredded it up. And now all that's left to do is just make up our bowls. The homemade tortilla strips are ready, and I've got a little bit of cheese to sprinkle on ours.
Yummy.
So many beans and rice variations that you could make using the slow cooker, especially if you are cooking beans from dry beans. I think the slow cooker is one of the best way to cook them. One of my favorite crockpot recipes I've made with dry beans, I used the smoked sausage. I just ground it up using my food processor and added some to the beans while they were cooking, along with some ranch seasoning, a little onion. You could use jalapeno or just a little bit of diced pepper. And let me tell you, those beans were so flavorful and delicious with the broth that it made over a big steaming bowl of rice. And that's also a really economical recipe too.
We're getting a super easy but super delicious potato soup going in the crock pot. I'm starting with 1 stalk of celery and 1 carrot chopped. You could put some chopped onion in here as well, but with my potato soup, I prefer to use onion powder because I want the onion flavor, but I don't like the chunky onions in my potato soup. I have peeled and chopped 2.5 pounds of potatoes, and those are going in the slow cooker now. Onion powder and garlic powder. I use about a teaspoon of each. Salt and pepper to taste. Now remember that half of a smoked sausage link we had left after the beans recipe? I'm actually gonna put that into the potato soup as well. And I just diced that up into little pieces, like so. This is seasoned, so it's gonna add a lot of flavor to the potato soup on its own. And then water or broth. If you've got bouillon, great. If you don't, just use water. You can always add just a little extra salt and pepper or seasoning to your crock pot to make up for it. I use enough water to make sure that the potatoes are submerged. So this time it took about 4 cups. Sometimes I have to add just a little bit more. I wanna make sure that they're all down in the water so that they cook nicely.
After the potatoes are done cooking and they're nice and tender, you can stir in about a cup of heavy cream if you want to stay within the capsule, and then just top your potato soup with grated cheddar cheese. You could also add some cream cheese. You could stir in about half a block of cream cheese at the end if you'd rather use that than the heavy cream. I started out by chopping up probably 4 or 5 cloves of garlic. I got some olive oil heating in my pot and I threw the garlic in there to saute just for about a minute or so. I am using a can of whole peeled San Marzano tomatoes. I decided not to crush the tomatoes yet or put them in a blender or anything. I'm just gonna let them simmer with the sauce, and if they're still not broken up after they simmer, I can always break them up later. I added some oregano, probably about a teaspoon, and I decided to add a little bit of red pepper flake because we do like a little kick. And when I was watching and reading some other recipes, one person added a whole peeled carrot while their sauce was simmering because they said that the sweetness from the carrot kind of helps cut any of the acidity in the tomatoes. I'm actually out of whole carrots, but I do have a few baby carrots, so I decided just to give this little trick a try. I decided to go ahead and add a Parmesan rind too. I do this to a lot of sauce and soups. I just keep these in the freezer. That is now simmering on the stove. I'm gonna let it simmer for about an hour, give it a stir, see where it is, and probably let it simmer, you know, for the better part of the afternoon until we're ready to use some of it. I wish you could smell what I'm smelling right now. It smells amazing. I took the carrots and the Parmesan wedge out, and it did not take very much work at all to break up the tomatoes. I stirred it a couple of times while it was simmering. It's been simmering about 2 hours. I just stirred it about once an hour. And so I didn't even need to use a masher, and you can see that the tomatoes are breaking up beautifully. So I'm gonna set aside a couple ladlefuls of this because we're having homemade pizzas tonight, and I thought this would make a good pizza sauce. In fact, you can hear the bread maker going in the background. I use the bread maker to make the dough on the dough cycle. It does all the work of mixing and kneading and letting it rise for me. And then once the rest of this is cooled, I'm just going to put it in a container and pop it in the fridge because I plan to use it for some kind of pasta dish tomorrow. I need to be walking out the door to pick a kid up in less than 10 minutes. And I still need to get something going in the crock pot for dinner tonight. We're gonna do a super easy ranch chicken Alfredo, and I'm gonna get that going. Toot sweet. 2 chicken breasts, 1 package of ranch seasoning, 1 to 2 tablespoons of minced garlic, 4 cups of chicken broth or a few cubes of bouillon, and 4 cups of water. Glug, 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 glug. Lid on. Low 4, 5 to 6, high 4, 3 to 4. It's been 3 hours. The chicken is done. Shredded up. 1 cup of cream. Added a little salt and pepper. And now I'm gonna put 12 ounces of noodles in there. Not quite a pound. Make sure those are totally submerged. Chicken goes back in, and then I'm gonna pop the lid on. This should take about 20 to 30 minutes on high to cook the pasta. If you were cooking it on low, you might wanna kick it up to high when you add the pasta. Okay, looking good. Last step is to put all this grated Parmesan, about a cup, into here and stir it up and just let it melt. And then it will be ready to serve, probably with some kind of vegetable. I don't know, we'll figure it out, but looks delicious, smells delicious. I'm pretty sure it will be delicious, and it was really easy. This one is gonna be a little bit lighter. It's a chicken and orzo soup, and I'm using a recipe that I've made before from Salt and Lavender. I'll leave it linked in the description box below, but I've made it on the stove before, and I'm going to adapt it for the crock pot and make a few changes. So I've already got my chicken in the slow cooker, and I'll show you what I'm adding to that. As I mentioned, already have my chicken breast in here. And I'm gonna throw in a couple little Parmesan rinds into this soup as well. The ends of the Parmesan, which I save. I just keep them in the freezer till I'm ready to use them. This is half of a small onion chopped, so it's maybe half a cup of chopped onion, probably a scant half cup. And then about a cup or so of chopped carrots. Celery would be good too if you have a few stalks of celery. I just don't have any today. I've got some minced garlic. I just bought fresh garlic bulbs today, but I wanna use the rest of this that's already chopped up. Probably about a tablespoon or so. I'm gonna change up the seasoning, and I'm gonna use rosemary. The Salt and Lavender recipe just calls for Italian seasoning. I really love the rosemary flavor with just about anything having to do with chicken, so I'm gonna put 2 teaspoons of this in. Oh, it smells so good. Okay. Salt and pepper to taste. I'm gonna go easy on the salt because we're using bouillon. 1 lemon juice. This is actually a gigantic, half of a gigantic lemon. These might be the biggest lemons I've ever seen. I can't even fit half of it in my little squeezer thingy-madoodle. 6 cups of chicken broth is what I need to add in here. And when I get to the bottom of the better than bouillon, I put a little warm water in the jar and shake it up really well. There's probably about a tablespoon of bouillon in here. So what I'm gonna do is just add the better than bouillon in here, and then I'll add the 6 cups of water to make up for the moisture. But see, I wanna get all of that from the bottom of the jar. There we go. See, we did pretty well there. We cleaned that sucker out. Now about 5.5 cups of water to make up the rest of the broth base. And I would cook this on low for about 6 hours. Since I'm getting a later start in the day, it's almost 3 o'clock, I'm going to put it on high for 3 hours, and then I'll be ready to come back and shred up the chicken because it will be cooked, and we will finish up this soup. We still have more stuff to add to it. I forgot to add the butter, but fortunately it's not too late. So I'm gonna toss in a couple tablespoons of butter also. I wanted to make sure I got that butter in there because otherwise this soup would be very, very lean. There's not any fat in the soup in most of these ingredients. And I feel like adding a fat just adds a little bit of flavor, a little bit of richness to the dish to make it more satisfying. You could add a little bit of heavy cream at the end of the cook cycle, like right when you're ready to serve it. That would, you know, probably serve that purpose as well. But I wanted to go ahead and use the butter and see how that turns out. It has been about 3.5 hours. My chicken was done and I already shredded that up. It was super easy to shred with a couple of forks, so I'm putting that back in. I'm also adding at this time 1 cup of orzo pasta and a cornstarch slurry. 1 tablespoon of cornstarch and 3 tablespoons of water, cold. Stir that all together and then add it to the pot. Once I get this all mixed in, I'm gonna pop the lid back on. It should take about 15 to 20 minutes for my orzo to cook on high, and then we'll be ready to serve this up. I had planned to make up a salad to go along with this, but honestly, I am hungry and I still have to run the swim car pool tonight. So I am going to eat this with just a side of little garlic toast. We just had some rolls left over that I needed to use up, and that is gonna be dinner tonight. Yummy. So far, I've shared with you about a dozen or so ideas for recipes that you can make in the crock pot using this capsule of ingredients. But if I keep going in the way that I have been, this video is gonna be like an hour long, and I know most people don't have time for that. We're gonna go into lightning round mode now, and I'm just gonna kind of rapid fire several more ideas for recipes that you can make using ingredients from this list. I've already talked about using the crock pot to make homemade marinara and let the sauce simmer for several hours for flavor. And if you are batch cooking your marinara and then storing it or freezing it for later, it would be very easy to make sort of a chicken marinara in your crock pot. Just throw a few chicken breasts or thighs into the crock pot with some of that marinara, maybe a little extra Italian seasoning or garlic. Let it cook until it's done and ready to shred up, and then you could serve it over pasta with some mozzarella or Parmesan cheese on top. I also have all of the ingredients in this capsule to make a crock-pot corn and potato chowder. I could keep that vegetarian, or I could throw in, you know, a chicken breast or thigh and make it a more meaty soup if I wanted. I have made many iterations of like a chicken chili over the years using mostly ingredients from this capsule. I personally would start with a few chicken breasts or thighs. I would throw in some white beans. I kind of like the cannellini beans or the Great Northern beans. Maybe a little bit of corn, some diced onion and garlic, maybe even a little bit of red pepper. And I would use half and half ranch seasoning and taco seasoning, like maybe a couple tablespoons of each. Throw that into the crock pot with a little water or chicken broth. Let it cook until the chicken is ready to shred up, and then add a little bit of cream and serve it with some shredded cheese. Maybe some tortilla chips if I have them. I will leave a recipe linked in the description box below that I think could easily be adapted for the crock pot for a chicken Florentine that you could then serve over rice or pasta. One of my family's favorite recipes is the cheesy smoked sausage pasta that I make in a skillet on the stove, but I have made that in the slow cooker as well. I just put everything into the crock pot and let it simmer for a few hours and let all the flavors kind of mingle, and then I will throw the pasta in the last 30 minutes before we're ready to serve it, and then stir in the cheese. That's something I might do on nights when we're eating in shifts. Everybody's coming and going from the house at different times, and I want to be able to keep that meal warm over, you know, the course of an hour or so instead of everybody eating all at once. If you have your spices and your condiments and your kitchen staples stocked, and you have something like soy sauce, brown sugar or honey, garlic, ginger, you could probably very easily throw together a crock pot teriyaki chicken or like a honey garlic chicken. I would slice up some bell peppers and throw those into the crock pot at the end of the cook cycle. So I would have like a teriyaki chicken or a honey garlic chicken that I could serve over rice. You could do a Google search for those more Asian flavor style dishes. I will leave linked in the description box the pins that I just showed you for that flavor profile. I also have all the ingredients in this capsule to make a really yummy pasta fagioli. Vegetables, beans, let that simmer together all day in a deliciously seasoned broth. You throw in a little pasta at the end and let that cook. And that is a dish that you can keep vegetarian, or you could even make it vegan, I think, if you want to switch over your broth to like a veggie broth. I think this is a pretty versatile list of ingredients, and I know that some of you watching probably have additional ideas besides the ones that I have shared. So feel free to leave me a comment below and let me know what you would make in the slow cooker using ingredients from my capsule list of 20 ingredients. And thank you again to today's sponsor, Wild Grain. You can check them out. They're linked in the description box below. You can pick out one of these videos to watch next, and I'll see you there.